Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the House. Today, we're going to be doing an unboxing of this Harbor Freight 110-pound pressurized abrasive blaster, and I purchased a 50-pound bag of the sand to go with it. Now, don't forget, you're going to need an air compressor as well, but let's get into the unboxing first. So let's get started. So I've had this Sandblaster for over a year, and I've never really had a chance to use it. I think it's going to come in really handy for getting the rust off of my new dump trailer. So if you've ever put together anything from Harbor Freight, you know that sometimes these manuals aren't very good. And I've taken a quick look at the assembly instructions on this. They're absolutely terrible. So let's start out by finding out what parts we have, see if we can figure this out on our own. We've got the cotter pins and washers for our wheels, and I'm assuming that one of these cotter pins goes to the leg. So let's put the wheels on first, and then we'll figure out the leg. I'm going to start by lifting up the bottom of the Sandblaster. Okay, now we're going to take one of our cotter pins and one of our washers. We're going to slide the wheel onto the bar. And you might have to move the bar over a little bit in order to find the hole. Make sure that the hole for the cotter pin is a little bit past the hole of the wheel so that you can fit your washer on there. You'll put your washer on, slide the cotter pin in. I always turn it to the side so that I can get a good grip on it with my needle nose pliers. And then you're just going to turn these so that that cotter pin doesn't fall out. There. Now the first one's installed. Let's go ahead and put the second one on. We're not quite done at the bottom. We need to put this leg in place, okay? There's a nub that's welded on the bottom of the tank that we're going to put this leg in place here. And you want to make sure this leg is angled. You're going to want the low part of that angle to be towards your wheels. So you've got your holes here. The low part is in between this section, and the high part is in between this section where the holes are. So we're going to make sure that the low section is towards the wheels. We're going to slide that in place. Then we're going to grab another cotter pin, slide that in, and just bend it. Now that the bottom of the blaster will be safe, what I want to do is I want to pick it up out of the box, and I'm going to flip it over and put it on the wheels and the leg now. While you're taking it out, you want to make sure that all of this part is protected. You've got the filter, you've got, the assembly at the bottom. Just be aware when you're taking it out of the box that you're not damaging any of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it this way so that I'm not ever touching anything on this end. There. Now you can see that you'll be able to roll this thing around quite easily. First thing we want to do is we want to set it up to accept air from our air compressor. Now, if you're like me, I use my air compressor for a lot of my tools around the house. So I'm just going to be using the hose. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I can plug this into here. So you will have to buy this, but this is a male end for your air compressor, and it's a male end on the thread as well. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this little plastic piece out of here, and we're going to put this in here, but we're going to put some tape on this first. They do give you a roll of the thread tape. So we're going to wrap this 4 or 5 times. That first wrap is always the hardest. And then you just want to go around 4 or 5 times, 6 times, whatever makes you comfortable. You don't want this thing to leak. You don't want any of your pneumatic tools to leak. That is one of the most annoying noises. All right, now that we have it wrapped with our tape, we're going to thread this in here. Now you'll just take your 9/16 wrench, and you don't have to go crazy here, but you want to make sure it's tight. There. All right, now that we have that installed, let's go ahead and install our trigger. Be very careful if you're using a straight edge like I am. Don't cut this hose. That would be a bad day. I'm very impressed by the strength or how dense this trigger is. I mean, it looks kind of cheap, but it feels solid. And the hose that came with it is really good as well. We're also going to use this clamp. We're going to put that on there, and then we're going to put this on the bottom. So you're going to want to tilt this down like this. I recommend not doing that because of the filter system and everything back here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of the foam or a piece of cardboard. I'm going to lay it down on the floor there, and then we're going to lean it forward so that we can get to the bottom and install this. Now let's make sure that our clamp is on our hose before we connect the hose, and then we're going to slide that on there. If you need to wiggle it around a little bit, but make sure it sits flush up against this piece here. Now you're going to bring your bracket up, and you're going to leave a little bit of a gap between this and your clamp. And I'm going to be using an 8mm socket. Tighten that down. Make sure it's nice and tight and that it doesn't pull off. And now you've got that installed. Now let's go ahead and set the Sandblaster back on its wheels. And I haven't found a really good spot because I don't like to leave things like this laying on the ground when I'm not using them. I guess I could just roll it up and set it like that to keep it off the ground. All right, we have one more part to install before we fill this up with sand, and that is the pressure gauge. Now, you're going to want this pressure gauge to face whichever way you think is going to be closest to you while you're using it. I believe I'll probably be facing this way, so I'll probably set the gauge facing that way as well. But if you think that you'll be, pushing this out and you'll be facing the machine this way while in use, then maybe you would face it that way. I don't think you can really screw that up. Again, we're gonna wrap the pressure gauge 4 or 5 times. I took that little plastic piece out of here, and then you're gonna slowly thread this in. If you feel too much resistance when you're first starting out, back it out and try to thread it again. Don't cross thread this thing. And I believe it's gonna be the 9/16. Yep, 9/16. Just like that. It's nice and tight, and it's facing the way that I want it to. Hang this up over here, because like I said, I don't like this stuff laying on the ground when not in use. So we're going to take this cap off, and this is very solid. This cap is solid steel. It is nice and heavy. When I first took this cap off, I noticed that there was some sand in here. And I think what happened is I would assume that they probably test these before they send them out. And there was just a little bit of sand on the thread here. So as I was backing it out the first time, I could hear the grinding of the sand. So all I did was I put the little blower nozzle on my air compressor, and I blew out the threads. If you hear that grinding noise, I would strongly recommend cleaning up that thread, because this is going to be crucial to the longevity of the use on this machine. Make sure you keep those threads clean. So we're going to take this off, and I'm sure you noticed this gigantic funnel. That's what this is for. So you're going to set that down in the hole, and now we're going to get our 50-pound bag of sand. Now this one is called Maintenance Formula XL. If you get some clumps, you can just break them up, shake it in. This is reminding me a lot of when I did the cement mixer video, because the bags are similar in weight and similarly are killing my back. All right, so even though that funnel is quite large, that took a little longer than I thought it was going to take. If you've done this before and there's a better trick to getting it in there faster, or it didn't really clump a lot. There were a few clumps at the very top of the bag here, But for the most part, it didn't clump up too bad. But again, if you have any suggestions for me on how to get that in there faster, I'd gladly take them. So now we've got that 50-pound bag in there. We can take this off, set that aside, and we're gonna wanna put our solid lid on. Again, now that we've got some of that stuff on here, I might take a rag real quick and just kind of clean off those threads. Guys, even though Harbor Freight does have, you know, cheaper quality tools, if you keep them clean and maintenance properly, they'll last a lot longer than you might expect. Okay, get that nice and tight. Now, you don't have to crank on this thing real tight. Just make sure that it's, you know, hand tight. And now it's ready to go. I'm actually not going to do a test in this video. I just wanted to show you how I put it together. On the next video, I hope you'll join us. We're gonna be using it for the first time on a new dump trailer that I just bought. And not only are we gonna be using this, but we're gonna be putting this up against 2 other ways of removing rust, and we're gonna see which one works the best. So I hope you'll join us in that next video. If you liked this one, please hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.